Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into a profession that makes regular stress look like a vacation. We're talking about bomb disposal experts, the people who wake up every morning knowing their job might literally blow up in their face. And before you start thinking about Hollywood heroes calmly cutting the red wire with seconds to spare, let me tell you something. The reality would probably have you running for the nearest exit before lunch. So before we get started, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Because we're about to explore why most of us wouldn't survive even one day in the life of someone who makes a living diffusing death. Chapter 1. Your First Day Briefing. Welcome to the world of controlled terror. Congratulations! You've just been assigned to the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit. The good news? You'll never be bored at work. The bad news? Every single day you clock in, there's a non-zero chance you won't clock out. So let's talk about how your day actually begins. Your morning briefing doesn't start with coffee and donuts. Instead, it starts with intelligence reports about potential threats in your area. Today's agenda might include a suspicious package at a school, an unexploded shell from a construction site, or that backpack someone left at the subway station that's been making everyone nervous. But here's what they don't tell you in the movies. Most bomb disposal calls aren't actually bombs. Studies show that roughly 85% of suspicious devices turn out to be false alarms. Sounds reassuring, right? Wrong. Because that means 15% of the time, you're dealing with something that could reduce you to your component atoms in milliseconds. And here's the crucial point. Unlike the Hollywood version where the expert always knows exactly what they're looking at, real explosive devices come in thousands of variations. Improvised explosive devices, military ordnance from various decades, commercial explosives gone wrong, homemade contraptions built by people with more anger than expertise. Each one is a puzzle where the wrong solution means game over. Your first lesson becomes crystal clear immediately. There's no such thing as a routine call. That probably harmless device could be hiding a secondary explosive designed specifically to eliminate first responders. That abandoned suitcase could contain enough explosive material to level half a city block. And that suspicious wire sticking out of the ground? It might be connected to something that's been waiting patiently for decades to fulfill its original purpose. The psychological weight hits you immediately. Every step you take toward a potential explosive device is a step away from safety, from your family, from the assumption that you'll see tomorrow. Your hands might shake. Your heart will definitely race. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a little voice will start calculating the statistical probability that this could be your last conscious moment. But you keep walking forward anyway. Because that's the job. That's what you signed up for. And that's exactly why most people wouldn't last until lunch on their first day. Chapter 2. The Weight of the Suit. Your armor against obliteration. Now it's time to suit up. And if you thought putting on a uniform was straightforward, you're about to learn otherwise. The bomb disposal suit isn't clothing. It's a wearable fortress designed to keep you alive when everything around you wants to kill you. Let me paint the picture of what you're actually putting on. The suit weighs between 80 to 100 pounds. That's like strapping a large adult to your body before you even start walking toward danger. The helmet alone weighs about 15 pounds. Imagine wearing a bowling ball on your head while trying to perform microsurgery. Because that's essentially what you're doing. Here's the uncomfortable truth they don't advertise. The suit is built to withstand blast fragments, not the full force of an explosion. Let me be crystal clear about this. If you're close enough to a significant explosive device when it detonates, the suit isn't going to save you. It's designed to protect against shrapnel and debris, not the physics-defying pressure wave that can liquefy organs and turn bones to powder. But here's where it gets psychologically challenging. Wearing the suit creates a false sense of security. You feel protected, armored, invincible. This is dangerous thinking. In fact, the suit can actually make you overconfident, leading to mistakes that could prove fatal. It's heavy, restrictive, and exhausting to wear for extended periods. Try this thought experiment with me. Put on the heaviest winter coat you own, then add a heavy backpack. Then wrap your head in thick padding that limits your vision and hearing. Now, try to manipulate small, delicate objects with thick gloves while walking carefully across uneven ground. That's your reality now, except the small, delicate object you're manipulating could explode if you breathe on it wrong. And the complications don't stop there. The helmet has a limited field of vision. You can't see your peripheral vision, can't hear clearly, and can't communicate effectively with your team except through radio. You're essentially working in sensory isolation while performing tasks that require absolute precision. And here's something they don't mention in the recruitment videos. You have to relieve yourself before putting the suit on, because once you're sealed in, there are no bathroom breaks. A 4-hour operation means 4 hours of physical and psychological endurance in a wearable prison. The suit gets hot, very hot. Even in moderate temperatures, the interior can reach over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. You're sweating profusely, which fogs your visor and makes your hands slippery inside the gloves. Dehydration becomes a real concern, but drinking water isn't an option once you're suited up. Your movements become deliberate and exhausting. Every step requires careful planning. Bending down to examine a device means fighting against the weight and bulk of the suit. Getting back up requires significant effort. By the time you reach your target, you're already physically drained before you've even begun the actual work. This is your new normal. This is what protection looks like in a profession where unprotected means instant death. Chapter 3. The Approach. Walking toward your own potential death. Now comes the part that separates bomb disposal experts from everyone else with survival instincts. The approach. You're walking toward something that might kill you, voluntarily, while everyone else is running in the opposite direction. The approach isn't just walking, it's a methodical, calculated advance where every step could be your last. You're scanning for secondary devices, tripwires, pressure plates, or any sign that someone has prepared a surprise specifically for you. Because here's a dark truth about bomb disposal: some devices are specifically designed to eliminate the people trying to disarm them. Your team is watching from a safe distance, usually several hundred yards away. They can communicate with you through radio, but ultimately, you're alone with the device. If something goes wrong, they can't reach you in time to help. They can't even reach you in time to say goodbye. The approach can take hours, literally hours. You're moving slowly, methodically, documenting everything you see, taking photographs for analysis, looking for patterns that might indicate the device's purpose, origin, or trigger mechanism. This isn't the movies where the expert rushes in and immediately starts cutting wires. This is painstaking, exhausting detective work performed while wearing 100 pounds of equipment and knowing that a single mistake means death. Your mind is processing thousands of details simultaneously. The color of the wires, the type of container, the placement of components, the presence of timers or sensors. You're also calculating blast radii, considering evacuation zones, and maintaining constant communication with your team about what you're observing. But here's what really gets to people: the silence. Once you're close enough to begin working, all background noise fades away. It's just you, the device, and the sound of your own breathing inside the helmet. That breathing gets louder as stress increases. Some technicians report that the sound of their own breathing becomes almost deafening, a constant reminder of mortality. You're also fighting against time. Not necessarily because there's a countdown clock, though sometimes there is, but because the longer you're exposed, the higher the risk. Your physical endurance is limited. Your mental focus has an expiration date. And somewhere, people are waiting for word about whether they can return to their normal lives or need to evacuate further. The approach is where most people would break. Not from cowardice, but from the simple human recognition that this situation violates every survival instinct we've evolved over millions of years. You're supposed to run from danger, not walk calmly toward it while carrying detailed analysis equipment. Chapter 4. Reading the Device. A puzzle where wrong answers are fatal. Now you're face to face with the device, and here's where your real education begins. Because every explosive device is a puzzle created by someone who either wanted to kill people or had a very specific purpose in mind. Your job is to reverse engineer their thinking while they're not around to explain it. Let's start with improvised explosive devices, or IEDs. These are homemade bombs, and they're particularly dangerous because they follow no standardized pattern. The person who built it might have been a trained engineer or a teenager with internet access and a grudge. They might have used military-grade explosives or fertilizer and diesel fuel. The trigger mechanism could be sophisticated or frighteningly simple. You're looking for several key components: the explosive material itself, the trigger mechanism, the power source, and the delivery method. But here's the challenge. You're identifying these components through visual inspection only. You can't just start poking around to see how things are connected. The explosive material might be obvious: blocks of C4, sticks of dynamite, bags of ammonium nitrate. Or it might be disguised as something harmless. Explosive compounds can be shaped, colored, and packaged to look like clay, soap, or even candy. Your ability to identify these substances by sight could mean the difference between safely disarming the device and accidentally triggering it. Trigger mechanisms are where things get really interesting, and by interesting, I mean potentially lethal. There are dozens of ways to trigger an explosive device: timers, pressure plates, tripwires, radio signals, light sensors, vibration detectors, even cell phone calls. Some devices have multiple trigger mechanisms as backup systems. Others have anti-tampering features designed to detonate if someone tries to disarm them. Here's a particularly nasty category: victim-operated devices. These are designed to explode when someone performs a normal, innocent action. Opening a door, picking up a package, starting a car, even walking across a specific area. The person who placed the device isn't around to trigger it. The victim triggers it themselves. Then there are command-detonated devices, controlled remotely by someone who might be watching you right now. Through binoculars, through security cameras, or just from a window across the street. They can see you approaching their device, see you beginning to work on it, and decide at any moment to trigger the explosion. You're also dealing with the possibility of secondary devices. These are additional explosives placed specifically to harm first responders. The initial device might be relatively small, designed to draw emergency personnel to a specific location. The secondary device is larger, placed where responders would naturally stage their operations, and designed to cause maximum casualties among police, firefighters, and bomb disposal teams. Every wire you see tells a story. Red doesn't mean stop and green doesn't mean go. The colors might be random, or they might follow a pattern known only to the builder. Some devices use multiple wires of the same color to confuse anyone attempting disarmament. Others use decoy wires that aren't connected to anything important, designed to waste your time and mental energy. You're also working under the assumption that the person who built this device might be more knowledgeable than you are. They had hours, days, or even weeks to plan and construct their device. They could research techniques, test components, and design specifically to defeat common disarmament procedures. You have minutes or hours to figure out what they've done. And here's the psychological weight that never leaves. Every decision you make is potentially final. Cut the wrong wire, touch the wrong component, or misinterpret the device's design. And the last thing you'll experience is a brief flash of light before unconsciousness. This is why bomb disposal experts spend years in training and continue learning throughout their careers. Because the people building explosive devices are also learning, adapting, and sharing knowledge. It's an arms race where second place means death. DTF. Chapter 5. The Tools of the Trade. Instruments of Precision in a World of Violence. Your toolkit isn't something you'll find at the local hardware store. These are specialized instruments designed for one purpose: manipulating explosive devices safely. And by safely, I mean reducing the probability of accidental detonation from extremely likely to merely quite possible. Let's start with the disruptor. This isn't a tool for disarming bombs, it's a tool for destroying them in a controlled manner. A disruptor fires a high-velocity projectile of water or metal designed to sever connections or destroy components before they can function. It's essentially a highly specialized shotgun that shoots precise streams of water at explosive devices. The theory sounds simple. Destroy the trigger mechanism or separate the explosive from the detonator before the device can function properly. The reality is far more complex. You need to position the disruptor precisely, account for the construction of the device, and hope that your disruption doesn't accidentally complete a circuit or trigger a backup mechanism. Then there's the portable X-ray machine. You can see inside packages, suitcases, and containers without opening them. This sounds incredibly useful until you realize that X-ray images of explosive devices can be extremely difficult to interpret. Wires, batteries, and electronic components create overlapping shadows. Dense materials block the X-ray entirely, and you're trying to interpret these images while wearing thick gloves and a helmet that limits your vision. For remote manipulation, you have robotic systems. These robots can approach devices, manipulate objects, and even attempt disarmament procedures while the operator remains at a safe distance. They're equipped with cameras, manipulation arms, and various sensors. They sound like the perfect solution until you try to perform delicate work through a robot arm controlled by joysticks while watching through a small video screen. But here's the reality. Robots have significant limitations. They can't feel texture or resistance. They can't assess the delicacy of components. They can't make split-second adjustments based on subtle cues. Most importantly, they can't think creatively or adapt to unexpected situations the way a human can. They're tools, not replacements for human expertise. You also have mirror systems and fiber optic cameras for visual inspection. These allow you to see around corners, under objects, or into small spaces without exposing yourself to additional risk. But they provide limited fields of view, and what you can't see might be more dangerous than what you can. Hook and line systems let you manipulate objects from a distance. You can pull, lift, or move components while remaining in a protected position. This sounds simple until you try to perform precise movements on a delicate mechanism using a hook attached to a long rope. It's like trying to perform surgery with fishing equipment. For communication, you have radio systems that connect you with your team, command centers, and technical experts who might be able to provide guidance. But here's the catch. Radio communications can be intercepted, and some explosive devices are designed to detonate when they detect specific radio frequencies. So even your communication tools can potentially trigger the very device you're trying to disarm. Detection equipment helps identify explosive materials, but it's not foolproof. Different compounds have different signatures, and some explosives are specifically designed to avoid detection. False positives can waste precious time, while false negatives can leave you working on a live device without realizing it. All of these tools require extensive training, constant maintenance, and most importantly, the judgment to know when and how to use them. The wrong tool applied in the wrong situation can turn a manageable situation into a catastrophe. And every tool has failure modes, mechanical problems, battery failures, software glitches, or simple operator error. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Despite all this technology, the most important tool in bomb disposal is still human intelligence. The ability to observe, analyze, reason, and make decisions under extreme pressure. All the robots and X-ray machines in the world can't replace the pattern recognition and creative problem-solving ability of an experienced human operator. But that human operator is still wearing 100 pounds of protective equipment, sweating in a sealed helmet, working with thick gloves that limit dexterity, and operating under the constant knowledge that a single mistake could be their last. The tools help, but they don't eliminate the fundamental reality of the job. You're still betting your life on your ability to outsmart someone who had plenty of time to plan your death. Chapter 6. The Psychology of Countdown. When Time Becomes Your Enemy. Not all explosive devices have timers, but when they do, you enter a completely different psychological space. Now, you're not just fighting against the device, you're racing against time itself, and time never loses. The sound of a ticking timer isn't like in the movies. Sometimes there's no sound at all. Digital timers count down silently, LED displays marking off seconds with no audio cue. When there is sound, it's often barely audible through your helmet, creating a maddening situation where you know time is running out, but can't quite hear how fast. Here's what happens to the human mind under time pressure. Your decision-making process accelerates, but not in a good way. You start taking shortcuts, making assumptions, and jumping to conclusions that you would never make under normal circumstances. The very thing that might keep you alive, careful, methodical analysis, becomes impossible to maintain. Your hands start shaking. Even experienced technicians report tremors when working against an active countdown. These aren't massive movements, but when you're trying to manipulate tiny wires or delicate components, even the smallest tremor can cause catastrophic mistakes. Time distortion becomes a major factor. Minutes feel like seconds when you're working frantically, but seconds feel like hours when you're waiting for a tool to function or trying to interpret visual information. Your internal chronometer becomes completely unreliable. You might think you have plenty of time remaining when you actually have seconds, or vice versa. The countdown creates tunnel vision. You become hyper-focused on the immediate task, cutting a specific wire, removing a particular component, while losing awareness of the bigger picture. You might successfully disarm the timer only to trigger a separate mechanism you didn't notice because you were fixated on the countdown display. There's also the psychological warfare aspect. Some devices have fake timers designed to create panic. Others have multiple countdown displays showing different times to confuse responders. Some reset or speed up unexpectedly. The person who built the device may have specifically chosen timer settings to maximize psychological pressure on anyone trying to disarm it. Then there's the mathematics of survival. If you have 5 minutes on the timer, how long do you need to reach minimum safe distance if disarmament fails? How far can you run in that heavy suit? Can your team evacuate the area in time? These calculations are running in the background of your mind while you're trying to concentrate on technical problems. Communication becomes both critical and difficult simultaneously. You need to keep your team informed of your progress and the countdown status, but talking takes time and mental energy away from the technical work. You're also dealing with radio protocols, background noise, and the constant awareness that everyone listening knows exactly how much time you have left. Some technicians report a phenomenon called countdown paralysis, a brief period where the awareness of diminishing time becomes so overwhelming that they temporarily freeze. This can happen with minutes remaining or with seconds left. It's a natural human response to impossible pressure, but in this profession, natural human responses can be fatal. The worst-case scenario isn't when the timer reaches 0 while you're still working. It's when the timer reaches 0 and nothing happens. Now you don't know if the device malfunctioned, if there's a secondary timer you haven't found, or if the whole thing was a psychological trick. Do you continue working? Do you evacuate? How do you make that decision when every option could be wrong? Here's the truth about working against countdown timers. Most bomb disposal experts will tell you that the timer isn't the real enemy. The real enemy is your own mind's response to time pressure. The timer is just a tool, sometimes functional, sometimes not. But your psychological response to that timer is what will determine whether you can maintain the clear thinking necessary to save your own life and the lives of others. This is why bomb disposal training includes extensive psychological conditioning. Not just technical knowledge, but mental resilience training designed to help operators function under the specific type of pressure that comes with countdown situations. Because when the timer is running, your technical skills matter less than your ability to keep your mind clear while staring death in the face. Chapter 7. When Things Go Wrong. Survival in the Face of Failure. Despite all the training, equipment, and expertise, sometimes things go wrong. And in bomb disposal, things going wrong doesn't mean missing a deadline or losing data. It means explosive devices functioning exactly as designed, which is to say, catastrophically. Let's start with partial detonations. These occur when an explosive device functions, but not completely. Maybe the detonator fires but only ignites part of the main explosive. Maybe a component fails and creates a smaller explosion than intended. From a technical standpoint, this might seem like a lucky break. From a survival standpoint, you now have a partially functioning explosive device in an unknown state. Partial detonations create fundamentally unstable situations. The remaining explosive material might be more sensitive now, ready to detonate from vibration, temperature changes, or electrical interference. Components that were previously stable might now be hanging by literal threads, and you have no way of knowing which parts of the device are still functional and which have been destroyed. The psychological impact is immediate and severe. You've just survived an explosion. Your ears are ringing, possibly bleeding. Your vision might be impaired by debris, smoke, or concussion effects. Your protective equipment may be damaged. And you need to make immediate decisions about whether the area is safe or if additional explosions are likely. Then there are technical failures, situations where your equipment malfunctions at critical moments. Robots lose communication, disruptors misfire, X-ray machines produce unclear images, or communication systems fail entirely. Each equipment failure doesn't just remove a tool from your toolkit, it removes your confidence in the other tools you're still using. Human error is another category of failure, and it's more common than anyone wants to admit. Misidentifying components, cutting the wrong wire, applying too much pressure to a sensitive mechanism, or simply making the wrong decision under pressure. The difference between this profession and others is that most mistakes are immediately and permanently fatal. Environmental factors can also cause operations to fail. Weather conditions affect visibility, equipment function, and physical performance. Working in confined spaces, such as inside buildings or vehicles, limits your options and escape routes. Time constraints imposed by external factors, approaching storms, public events, or infrastructure needs, can force rushed decisions that increase the likelihood of fatal mistakes. Communication failures create particularly dangerous situations. If you lose contact with your team, you're operating in isolation without backup expertise or coordination. You don't know if they're sending additional resources, calling for evacuation, or if they've encountered additional threats. You're making life or death decisions with incomplete information. One of the most psychologically challenging failures is discovering that you've been working on a decoy device while the real threat is elsewhere. This happens more often than the public realizes. Someone places an obvious, relatively simple explosive device to draw attention and resources, while a more sophisticated device is positioned to cause maximum damage to the emergency response effort. When technical disarmament fails, you have seconds to make a decision that will determine whether you live or die. Do you run? In a 100-pound suit, running is more like fast walking, and you might not reach minimum safe distance in time. Do you take cover? Behind what? Most available cover isn't designed to protect against explosive blasts. Do you try a different approach? You might not have time for another attempt. This is where training becomes critical, but also where training reaches its limits. You can practice failure scenarios, but you can't replicate the psychological pressure of knowing that your next decision might be your last. You can simulate equipment failures, but you can't simulate the fear, confusion, and sensory impairment that accompany real explosions. Survival in these situations often comes down to split-second decisions made with incomplete information under extreme pressure. Some technicians have survived by making unconventional choices, continuing to work when protocol says to evacuate, or evacuating when their analysis suggests the device is safe. These decisions are often criticized after the fact, regardless of outcome. The reality is that bomb disposal experts don't succeed because they never face failure. They succeed because they're trained to function even when everything goes wrong. But functioning under these conditions comes at a cost, and not everyone who enters this profession can pay that cost indefinitely. 3D, Chapter 8. The Invisible Wounds. Psychological trauma of diffusing death. What happens to your mind when your job involves walking toward explosive devices designed to kill you? What happens to your psychological well-being when you spend your career one mistake away from death? The answer is complex, deeply personal, and often invisible to outside observers. Post-traumatic stress disorder is common in bomb disposal work, but it doesn't always manifest the way people expect. It's not just about surviving explosions or witnessing casualties, though those experiences certainly contribute. It's about the cumulative psychological impact of constant exposure to life-threatening situations, often in isolation and under extreme pressure. Sleep disorders are nearly universal among active bomb disposal technicians. Your mind doesn't easily shift from hypervigilance to rest. You dream about devices, about countdowns, about scenarios where you make fatal mistakes. Some report dreams where they're working on a bomb but can't see clearly, can't move their hands properly, or can't remember their training. These dreams often continue years after retirement. Hypervigilance becomes a permanent state of mind. You scan environments for potential threats even when you're off duty. Unattended packages in public spaces trigger professional analysis. Unusual sounds, Unexpected electrical equipment, or even construction materials can activate threat assessment protocols that are difficult to shut off. Relationship strain is another common consequence. How do you explain to someone who's never faced these pressures what it's like to spend your day betting your life on technical knowledge? How do you come home and engage in normal conversation about daily concerns when you've spent 8 hours figuring out how to prevent catastrophic explosions? Many technicians develop what's called emotional numbing, a psychological defense mechanism that reduces the intensity of all emotional experiences. This helps manage the fear and stress of the job, but it also dampens positive emotions like joy, excitement, and affection. Family members often report that their loved one seems emotionally distant or disconnected. There's also survivor guilt, the psychological burden that comes from repeatedly surviving situations where others might have died. Every successful disarmament represents not just professional competence, but luck. Technicians often struggle with the knowledge that they've survived situations where tiny differences in timing, decision-making, or device construction could have resulted in their death. The isolation factor compounds these psychological challenges. During operations, you're physically isolated from your team and psychologically isolated by the unique pressures you face. Few people can truly understand what it's like to make life or death decisions while wearing 100 pounds of equipment and working with devices designed to kill you. Risk perception becomes distorted over time. Some technicians develop an unrealistic sense of invulnerability. They've survived so many dangerous situations that they begin to believe they can't be killed. Others develop paralyzing anxiety about routine activities, viewing normal life through the lens of potential explosive threats. Substance abuse rates are higher than average in this profession, often as a form of self-medication for anxiety, depression, or sleep disorders. Alcohol, prescription medications, and other substances provide temporary relief from hypervigilance and intrusive thoughts, but create additional problems over time. Career longevity is limited not just by physical demands, but by psychological sustainability. Many technicians report knowing when it's time to retire based on changes in their mental state rather than physical capabilities. They recognize when fear is beginning to interfere with decision-making or when the psychological pressure is affecting their personal lives beyond acceptable limits. The support systems that exist are often inadequate for the specific psychological challenges of bomb disposal work. Standard counseling approaches may not address the unique combination of isolation, technical pressure, and mortality awareness that defines this profession. Peer support from other technicians can be valuable, but it's often limited by the small size of the professional community. Perhaps most challenging is the fact that these psychological wounds are largely invisible. A technician who successfully disarms dozens of devices may appear highly competent and emotionally stable to outside observers, while struggling internally with anxiety, depression, sleep disorders, and relationship problems. The same mental toughness that enables success in the field often prevents acknowledgement of psychological distress. This is the hidden cost of bomb disposal work. Not just the physical danger, but the psychological toll of spending your career in situations that violate fundamental human survival instincts. It's a cost that many are willing to pay, but few fully understand until they're already paying it. Chapter 9. Training for the Impossible. Learning to function in lethal situations. Before you ever approach your first live explosive device, you'll spend months or even years in training programs designed to prepare you for situations that defy normal human psychology. This isn't training in the traditional sense. It's conditioning for survival in environments where mistakes are measured in body parts rather than performance reviews. The training begins with extensive study of explosive materials and devices. You're not just memorizing facts, you're building mental libraries of patterns, configurations, and construction techniques used by various groups and individuals. Military ordnance follows certain patterns based on doctrine and available materials. Terrorist devices reflect training, resources, and psychological objectives. Criminal explosives often show improvisation and desperation. But textbook knowledge only takes you so far. Much of your education comes from studying failed attacks, partially exploded devices, and post-incident analysis. You're learning from situations where someone else made the wrong decision, and the evidence of that mistake is scattered across a crime scene in pieces too small to identify. Physical conditioning is crucial, not just for carrying heavy equipment, but for performing precise work while exhausted, stressed, and physically uncomfortable. You practice manipulating small objects while wearing thick gloves, walking steadily while carrying awkward loads, and maintaining fine motor control when your heart rate is elevated and your hands are shaking. Psychological conditioning is equally important and much more difficult to quantify. How do you train someone to walk calmly toward objects designed to kill them? How do you prepare someone to make life-or-death decisions while isolated and under extreme time pressure? The training programs use graduated exposure, starting with obviously safe devices and gradually introducing more realistic and stressful scenarios. But here's the fundamental limitation. Simulation training has advanced significantly, but it can't replicate one crucial element. You can practice with realistic mock devices, but you can't simulate the psychological pressure of knowing that a real explosive device will actually kill you if you make a mistake. The fear response is different when you know intellectually that you're safe versus knowing physically that you're not. Team training is critical because bomb disposal is never a solo operation, even when you're the only person approaching the device. Communication protocols, evacuation procedures, and coordination with other emergency services all require practice under stressful conditions. Your team needs to function effectively while one member is in immediate mortal danger. Equipment training goes far beyond learning which buttons to push. You need to understand the limitations, failure modes, and alternative applications of every tool you might use. When your primary plan fails, and eventually it will, you need to be able to adapt using whatever resources are available. Scenario-based training attempts to replicate the complexity of real operations. Multiple devices, conflicting information, equipment failures, time constraints, and communication problems are all introduced to create realistic stress levels. But even the most sophisticated training scenarios can't replicate the specific psychological pressure of working with live explosives. Cross-training with other specialties is essential. You need to understand how firefighters, police officers, emergency medical personnel, and military units operate, so you can coordinate effectively during joint operations. You also need to understand the capabilities and limitations of other specialists who might be called in to assist. Continuing education never stops because the threats continue to evolve. New explosive materials, trigger mechanisms, and construction techniques appear regularly. International terrorism, domestic threats, and criminal innovation all contribute to an ever-changing landscape of potential devices that you might encounter. Perhaps most importantly, you're trained to recognize your own limitations and mental state. Fatigue, stress, distraction, or personal problems can all affect your performance in ways that could be fatal. Part of professional competence is knowing when you're not capable of operating safely and removing yourself from dangerous situations. But here's the fundamental challenge with training for bomb disposal. You're preparing for situations that shouldn't exist, using skills that ideally would never be needed, under conditions that violate basic human survival instincts. No amount of training can completely prepare someone for the reality of betting their life on technical knowledge while isolated and under pressure. The training gives you tools, knowledge, and confidence. But ultimately, Every operation involves stepping beyond your training into a unique situation where you have to trust your judgment, your skills, and your ability to function when everything around you is designed to kill you. That's not something you can fully train for. That's something you can only survive. Chapter 10. The Technology Race. When innovation becomes survival. In the world of explosive device disposal, technology isn't just about convenience or efficiency. It's about staying ahead of people who are actively trying to kill you with increasingly sophisticated methods. This is an arms race, where second place means death, and the pace of innovation on both sides is accelerating. Modern explosive devices bear little resemblance to the simple bombs of previous decades. Cell phone triggers allow remote detonation from anywhere in the world with cellular coverage. GPS-triggered devices can be programmed to explode when they reach specific locations. Accelerometer triggers detect movement or vibration patterns. Some devices even use artificial intelligence to analyze their environment and choose optimal timing for detonation. The miniaturization of electronics has made detection and analysis much more difficult. Components that once required briefcase-sized containers can now fit inside everyday objects: pens, cell phones, laptop computers, or even smaller items. The explosive materials themselves have also evolved, with some compounds designed specifically to avoid detection by conventional screening methods. Counter-surveillance has become a major concern. Many modern devices include cameras or sensors that monitor the surrounding area, transmitting real-time video to whoever placed the device. This means that your approach, your techniques, and your equipment capabilities might be observed and analyzed by hostile forces even as you work. Cybersecurity intersects with explosive device disposal in unexpected ways. Many detection and analysis tools now rely on wireless communication, computer systems, and networked databases. These systems can potentially be hacked, providing false information or even being used to trigger the very devices you're trying to disarm. Your own equipment might be turned against you. Robotic systems have advanced significantly, but so have anti-robot countermeasures. Some explosive devices are now designed to detect the electromagnetic signatures of common robot systems and either detonate immediately or activate additional defensive measures. Others use visual or auditory sensors to distinguish between human and robotic approaches. 3D printing has democratized the construction of device components, allowing virtually anyone to create custom trigger mechanisms, housings, or delivery systems. The designs can be shared instantly across the internet, modified for local conditions, and printed using materials that might avoid detection. Traditional intelligence about manufacturing sources and supply chains becomes less relevant. Artificial intelligence is being incorporated into both offensive and defensive systems. AI can help analyze device construction, predict likely trigger mechanisms, or optimize disarmament approaches. But it can also be used to create more sophisticated devices, analyze defensive countermeasures, or coordinate multiple threats simultaneously. The Internet of Things has created new vulnerabilities and opportunities. Everyday objects, from smart refrigerators to fitness trackers, can potentially be modified to serve as triggers or sensors for explosive devices. The same connectivity that makes life convenient also creates attack vectors that didn't exist in previous decades. But here's the reality that makes this technological race particularly challenging. Quantum technologies, while still in development, represent both opportunities and threats for explosive device disposal. Quantum sensors could potentially detect explosive materials with unprecedented sensitivity and precision. But quantum encryption could also be used to create trigger systems that are essentially impossible to intercept or decode. Directed energy weapons are being developed as potential countermeasures against explosive devices. High-powered microwave systems could potentially disable electronic components without physical contact. Laser systems might be able to destroy trigger mechanisms or even detonate devices safely from a distance. But these technologies also create new risks. What happens if you accidentally activate a device while attempting to disable it? The challenge isn't just keeping up with technological advances, it's predicting which technologies might be weaponized by hostile forces. Consumer electronics, industrial equipment, scientific instruments, and even medical devices can potentially be modified for explosive device applications. Your understanding of potential threats needs to expand constantly. Training on new technologies never ends because the technology landscape never stops evolving. By the time you've mastered one generation of detection equipment, threat analysis software, or robotic systems, the next generation is already in development. And somewhere, someone is figuring out how to defeat whatever systems you're currently using. This technological arms race has a psychological component that's often overlooked. The knowledge that your equipment and techniques might be obsolete by the time you finish training creates a constant undercurrent of uncertainty. You're not just betting your life on your current knowledge, you're betting it on your ability to adapt to threats that don't exist yet. But perhaps the most challenging aspect is that technology can't replace human judgment. All the sensors, robots, and analysis software in the world still require a human operator to make final decisions about how to proceed. And those decisions still carry the same ultimate consequence: death for getting it wrong. Chapter 11. International Variations. Different countries. Different nightmares. Explosive device disposal isn't a standardized profession worldwide. Different countries face different threats, use different technologies, and operate under different protocols. What works in one environment might be catastrophically inappropriate in another, and bomb disposal experts who work internationally must adapt to an ever-changing landscape of local threats and resources. In countries with active military conflicts, unexploded ordnance from various time periods creates unique challenges. You might encounter devices from World War II, Cold War conflicts, and recent military actions all in the same area. Each era brings different explosive compounds, trigger mechanisms, and deterioration patterns. A device that was stable when originally deployed might become highly sensitive after decades of environmental exposure. Urban terrorism presents different challenges than rural insurgency. City environments offer concealment opportunities, but also limit explosion effects and evacuation options. Rural areas provide fewer hiding places, but also fewer response resources and longer evacuation times. The tactical considerations for each environment require different training, equipment, and operational procedures. Some regions face threats from criminal organizations rather than terrorist groups. Drug cartels, organized crime syndicates, and other criminal enterprises use explosive devices differently than political extremists. Their devices might be designed for intimidation rather than mass casualties, or for destroying evidence rather than creating media attention. Understanding the motivations behind device construction affects your analysis and disarmament approach. Resource availability varies dramatically between countries and regions. State-of-the-art robotic systems and detection equipment might be standard in wealthy nations but completely unavailable in developing countries. Improvisation becomes crucial when you can't rely on specialized tools. Sometimes the most sophisticated analysis has to be performed with basic visual inspection and simple hand tools. Training standards and certification processes differ significantly worldwide. What qualifies someone as a bomb disposal expert in one country might be considered inadequate preparation in another. International operations often require understanding and adapting to local expertise levels, communication protocols, and operational procedures. Cultural factors influence both threat patterns and response procedures. Religious extremism, ethnic conflicts, political instability, and historical grievances all shape the types of devices you might encounter and the environments where you'll encounter them. Local customs might affect evacuation procedures, evidence handling, or coordination with civilian authorities. Language barriers create additional safety risks during international operations. Technical terminology, emergency communications, and coordination protocols all require precise language. Misunderstandings during critical moments can have fatal consequences. Even when working with translators, the nuances of technical communication might be lost. Legal frameworks vary significantly, affecting everything from evidence preservation to the use of force in defending disposal sites. What's considered standard procedure in one jurisdiction might be illegal in another. International operations often require understanding complex legal environments while maintaining focus on immediate safety concerns. Equipment compatibility issues arise when working with international partners. Radio frequencies, power requirements, interface protocols, and even basic measurement units might be different. Your specialized equipment might be useless if it can't integrate with local communication systems or power supplies. Environmental factors present unique challenges in different regions. Desert conditions affect equipment operation and human endurance differently than Arctic environments. Tropical climates accelerate equipment deterioration and create biological hazards. High-altitude operations require different physical preparation and equipment modifications. Intelligence quality and availability vary dramatically depending on local resources and political relationships. In some locations, you might have detailed background information about potential threats. In others, you're operating with minimal intelligence in unfamiliar environments where local knowledge is crucial but difficult to obtain. Perhaps most challenging is the fact that threat evolution occurs differently in different regions. Techniques that become common in one area might spread to others, but the timing and adaptation patterns are unpredictable. A method that's well understood in one context might appear as a novel threat when encountered elsewhere. This international variation means that bomb disposal expertise is never complete. Experience in one environment provides valuable background knowledge, but every new location requires learning new threat patterns, adapting to local resources, and understanding regional factors that might affect device construction and placement. Chapter 12. The Aftermath. What happens after the bomb is gone? The moment you successfully disarm an explosive device isn't the end of your work. It's often just the beginning of a complex process that can take days, weeks, or even months to complete. The psychological relief of survival is immediately replaced by the methodical requirements of post-incident analysis, evidence preservation, and threat assessment. Evidence collection begins before you even remove the device. Every component, wire, fragment, and trace material might contain crucial information about who built the device, where they obtained materials, what their capabilities are, and what other threats might exist. This evidence collection has to be performed while maintaining chain of custody protocols that will hold up in court proceedings. Forensic analysis of explosive devices reveals information that extends far beyond the immediate threat. Manufacturing techniques, tool marks, material sources, and construction patterns can be matched against databases of known terrorist organizations, criminal groups, or individual bomb makers. Sometimes a single wire connector or soldering pattern can link devices across continents and time periods. Intelligence exploitation means extracting every possible piece of information that might prevent future attacks. Electronic components might contain data about communication networks. Material analysis might reveal supply chain vulnerabilities. Construction techniques might indicate training backgrounds or organizational connections. This analysis requires coordination between multiple agencies and technical specialists. Threat assessment continues long after the immediate device is neutralized. Was this device part of a larger campaign? Are there additional devices already placed? What does this incident tell us about evolving threat capabilities? The answers to these questions affect security preparations and resource allocation far beyond the immediate incident. Site remediation can be extensive, especially if the device contained hazardous materials or if the disarmament process caused environmental contamination. Some explosive compounds leave toxic residues. Others create long-term environmental hazards. The area might need specialized cleaning, monitoring, or even permanent evacuation, depending on what materials were involved. Legal proceedings often require the bomb disposal expert to testify about device construction, threat assessment, and disarmament procedures. This testimony has to be understandable to judges and juries who have no technical background, while remaining scientifically accurate and legally precise. Your actions during the incident might be scrutinized in detail months or years later. Media attention is often intense and sometimes counterproductive. Public interest in bomb disposal operations can interfere with ongoing investigations or operational security. Information released to media might provide intelligence to hostile groups about response capabilities and procedures. Managing public communication while maintaining operational effectiveness requires careful coordination. Psychological processing of successful operations is often overlooked but critically important. The adrenaline crash after high-stress incidents can be severe. Sleep disturbances, anxiety, and hypervigilance often persist for days or weeks after successful operations. The knowledge that you came close to death doesn't disappear just because you survived. Training updates based on lessons learned from each incident are continuous. New threat patterns, equipment failures, or procedural gaps identified during operations are incorporated into training programs for current and future technicians. Every incident contributes to the collective knowledge base that might save lives in future operations. Equipment analysis and maintenance become critical after each use. Protective suits might have sustained damage that isn't immediately visible. Electronic systems might have been affected by electromagnetic pulses or environmental conditions. Robotic systems might need recalibration or component replacement. Equipment reliability depends on thorough post-incident maintenance. Documentation requirements are extensive and detailed. Every decision, observation, and procedure must be recorded for legal, training, and operational purposes. This documentation might be reviewed by supervisors, legal teams, intelligence analysts, or investigative committees. Accuracy and completeness are essential, but the documentation process can't interfere with immediate safety operations. Sometimes the aftermath includes discovering that you worked on a decoy device while the real threat was elsewhere. This is particularly psychologically challenging because it means your successful operation might have been irrelevant or even counterproductive. The relief of survival gets replaced by the stress of knowing that the actual threat is still active. The transition back to normal life after high-stress operations is never immediate or simple. Your nervous system remains activated for extended periods. Routine activities feel strange and unimportant compared to life-or-death decision-making. Family and friends often can't understand why you seem distant or preoccupied after what appears to be a successful operation. This extended aftermath of bomb disposal operations is one reason why the profession has such high psychological attrition rates. The immediate stress of the operation is intense but brief. The extended stress of dealing with legal, investigative, and psychological consequences can last for months and affects every aspect of your life outside of work. Chapter 13. The Human Cost. Families, Friends, and the Price of Peace. Being a bomb disposal expert doesn't just affect your own life. It ripples outward, touching everyone who cares about you in ways that are often unexpected and profound. The psychological burden of this profession extends far beyond the individual operator, creating stress patterns that can strain or break relationships with the people you're trying to protect. Spouses and partners face unique challenges that civilian relationships rarely encounter. They wake up each day knowing that their loved one is going to work in situations where death is a constant possibility. There's no gradual escalation of risk. Every call could be the one that ends their relationship permanently. This creates a background level of anxiety that never fully disappears. Communication becomes complicated when you can't discuss the details of your work. Operational security requirements, classified information, and the simple desire to protect your family from disturbing details all limit what you can share about your daily experiences. This creates emotional distance even in otherwise close relationships. Children of bomb disposal experts often develop anxiety patterns related to their parents' profession. They might become fearful when the parent is late coming home, or develop obsessive behaviors around safety and security. Some become overly protective of the parent, feeling responsible for their safety. Others become rebellious, acting out the stress they can't directly express. Extended family members often don't understand the profession or its requirements. They might minimize the risks, not understanding why routine family activities need to be planned around operational availability. Or they might become overprotective, treating every interaction as if it might be the last. Both reactions create additional stress for the operator and their immediate family. Social relationships outside of work become strained by the constant awareness of mortality and the intensity of operational experiences. Normal social concerns, job stress, relationship problems, financial issues can seem trivial compared to daily life and death decisions. This creates isolation and difficulty connecting with civilian friends and colleagues. The unpredictable schedule of emergency response work makes it difficult to maintain consistent family routines, social commitments, or personal relationships. Important family events might be missed because of operational requirements. Vacation plans are always tentative. Even routine activities like dinner out or movies are subject to cancellation if you're called to respond to a threat. Financial planning becomes complicated by the high-risk nature of the profession. Life insurance rates are typically higher, and some policies exclude coverage for deaths related to explosive device disposal. Disability insurance is essential but expensive. Long-term financial planning must account for the possibility of early retirement due to injury or psychological factors. Career longevity issues affect family planning in unique ways. Most bomb disposal experts can't continue in operational roles throughout a normal career span. This means planning for career transitions while still supporting a family. The specialized skills that make someone excellent at bomb disposal don't always transfer easily to civilian careers. Geographic mobility is often required for career advancement or operational assignments. But moving is complicated when family members have developed support networks and coping strategies in a specific location. Military families are accustomed to frequent moves, but civilian bomb disposal experts often face similar requirements without the same support infrastructure. The psychological changes that occur in bomb disposal operators inevitably affect their relationships. Hypervigilance, emotional numbing, and sleep disturbances don't disappear when you come home. Family members often report feeling like they're living with someone who's emotionally distant or psychologically absent, even when physically present. Support systems for families are often inadequate or non-existent. While the operators themselves might have access to peer support groups or professional counseling, their families are often left to cope independently. Spouses and children might have no one to talk to who understands their specific situation. The heroic image of bomb disposal work can actually create additional pressure for families. Society tends to view these operators as heroes, which makes it difficult for family members to express the legitimate frustrations, fears, and resentments that come with loving someone in such a high-risk profession. They're expected to be proud and supportive, even when they're terrified and exhausted. Perhaps most challenging is the fact that these family stresses never completely resolve. Even after retirement from operational roles, the psychological effects of the profession continue. Health problems related to stress and exposure might persist. Sleep disorders and anxiety might continue for years. The family has to adapt not just to the operational period, but to the long-term consequences of having lived with extreme stress for extended periods. This human cost extends beyond immediate families to the broader community of people who work in this profession. Friendships, professional relationships, and community connections all bear the weight of the constant awareness that any gathering might be the last time you see certain people alive. The profession creates a unique form of community, but it's a community built around shared understanding of mortality and risk. Chapter 14. Training Grounds, where heroes learn to die. The facilities where bomb disposal experts are trained don't look like typical schools or academies. They look like controlled disaster zones, because that's essentially what they are. Carefully orchestrated environments where students learn to function in situations designed to kill them. Training ranges are built to contain explosions safely, while providing realistic scenarios for student practice. Concrete bunkers, earthwork barriers, and blast-resistant observation posts allow instructors to monitor student performance while maintaining safe distances from training devices. The ranges themselves often show the scars of thousands of training explosions, crater marks, blast damage, and structural repairs that serve as constant reminders of the destructive forces students are learning to control. Mock buildings and vehicles provide realistic training environments for urban and transportation-related threats. These structures are built to be damaged and repaired repeatedly, allowing students to practice in scenarios that closely replicate real operational conditions. Cars, buses, aircraft sections, and building interiors are modified to accommodate training devices while providing protection for student operators. The training devices themselves range from completely inert props to live explosive devices with reduced charges. Students start with obviously fake devices designed to teach basic procedures without any risk. They progress through increasingly realistic scenarios until they're working with actual explosive materials under controlled conditions. This progression is carefully managed to build confidence while maintaining safety. But here's what makes this training uniquely challenging. Psychological stress training attempts to replicate the mental pressure of operational situations without the lethal consequences. Time constraints, simulated equipment failures, distracting environmental conditions, and high-pressure evaluations all contribute to stress levels that approach operational conditions. But simulation can only go so far. The fundamental knowledge that training devices won't actually kill you creates a different psychological environment than real operations. Physical conditioning training prepares students for the demanding requirements of working in protective equipment under stressful conditions. This isn't just general fitness, it's specific preparation for performing precise manual tasks while exhausted, overheated, and carrying heavy equipment. Students learn to maintain fine motor control even when their bodies are pushed to physical limits. Equipment training goes far beyond basic operation of tools and protective systems. Students learn to diagnose equipment malfunctions, perform field repairs, and adapt equipment for non-standard applications. They also learn the failure modes of different systems and how to continue operations when primary equipment doesn't function properly. Team coordination training emphasizes the collaborative nature of bomb disposal operations. Even though one person typically approaches the device, successful operations depend on effective coordination between multiple specialists, support personnel, and other agencies. Students learn communication protocols, evacuation procedures, and coordination techniques that enable effective teamwork under pressure. Academic instruction covers the theoretical foundations that support practical skills. Chemistry, electronics, materials science, and physics all provide essential background knowledge for understanding explosive devices and disarmament techniques. But this academic knowledge has to be integrated with practical skills in ways that allow rapid application under pressure. Case study analysis exposes students to real-world scenarios and decision-making processes used in actual operations. These studies often focus on both successful operations and failures, allowing students to understand not just what works, but what can go wrong and why. Learning from other people's mistakes is essential when your own mistakes might be fatal. Psychological preparation is perhaps the most difficult aspect of training to design and implement. How do you prepare someone mentally for situations where they will be isolated, under extreme pressure, and facing the possibility of immediate death? Training programs use various techniques including stress inoculation, visualization exercises, and graduated exposure to increasingly challenging scenarios. But the fundamental challenge remains. Training environments are inherently safer than operational environments, no matter how realistic they are. The knowledge that safety systems are in place, that instructors are monitoring the situation, and that backup procedures exist creates a different psychological context than actual operations where you are ultimately responsible for your own survival. International training exchanges expose students to different techniques, equipment, and threat patterns from other countries. This broadens their understanding of potential device types and disarmament approaches, but also highlights the fact that threats and techniques are constantly evolving worldwide. Instructor qualifications are critical because students are literally learning life and death skills. Instructors must have extensive operational experience, teaching abilities, and the judgment to know when students are ready to progress to more dangerous training scenarios. The instructor's assessment of student readiness might determine whether the student lives or dies in future operations. Failure in training has different consequences than failure in operations. Students who can't meet training standards are redirected to other careers rather than being killed by explosive devices. This creates a selection process that identifies people with the necessary combination of technical skills, physical capabilities, and psychological resilience to succeed in operational roles. But even successful completion of training is just the beginning of a learning process that continues throughout an operational career. The training provides a foundation of knowledge and skills, but every real operation teaches lessons that can't be replicated in training environments. The most important thing training provides isn't technical knowledge. It's the confidence and mental framework necessary to continue learning under operational conditions where mistakes are immediately and permanently fatal. Chapter 15. The Global Network: Intelligence, Cooperation, and Shared Nightmares. Bomb disposal isn't a job that exists in isolation. Behind every successful operation is an invisible network of intelligence analysts, technical specialists, international partners, and institutional knowledge that spans decades and continents. Understanding this network is crucial to understanding why some operations succeed and others fail catastrophically. Intelligence fusion centers collect and analyze information about explosive device threats from sources worldwide. Technical intelligence about new device types, construction techniques, and material sources is shared between countries and agencies to help field operators understand what they might encounter. But this intelligence sharing is complicated by classification levels, political relationships, and the simple fact that threat information becomes obsolete quickly as techniques evolve. Forensic databases contain detailed information about explosive devices, their components, and their creators. When you disarm a device, the forensic analysis might reveal connections to other devices found thousands of miles away or years in the past. These connections help law enforcement agencies track terrorist networks and criminal organizations, but they also provide intelligence about evolving threat capabilities. Technical advisory networks connect field operators with subject matter experts who might be able to provide guidance during complex operations. If you encounter an unfamiliar device type or construction technique, you can potentially consult with specialists who have seen similar devices in other locations. But this consultation takes time, and time is often the one resource you don't have during operations. International training programs and personnel exchanges help spread knowledge and techniques between countries and organizations. A technique developed by specialists in one country might save lives when applied by operators elsewhere. But cultural differences, language barriers, and varying resource levels all complicate these knowledge transfer efforts. Research and development programs work continuously to develop new detection methods, protective equipment, and disarmament techniques. But this research has to balance multiple requirements: effectiveness against current threats, adaptability to evolving threats, reliability under operational conditions, and cost considerations for widespread deployment. The private sector plays a growing role in explosive device disposal through equipment manufacturing, technical services, and specialized training programs. Defense contractors, technology companies, and specialized consulting firms all contribute capabilities that government agencies might not be able to develop internally. But private sector involvement also creates concerns about security, cost, and operational control. Academic institutions contribute research and analysis capabilities that help understand threat evolution and develop countermeasures. Universities and research institutes often have access to theoretical knowledge and experimental capabilities that operational agencies lack. But academic research operates on different timelines and has different priorities than immediate operational needs. Media and public information management is crucial for operational security and public safety. Information about successful operations might provide intelligence to hostile forces about response capabilities and procedures. But public awareness and education are also important for identifying potential threats and maintaining political support for bomb disposal programs. Legal frameworks govern evidence handling, international cooperation, and operational authorities in different jurisdictions. These legal requirements can significantly affect how operations are conducted and what resources are available. International operations often require coordination between multiple legal systems with different requirements and procedures. The flow of information through these networks is often imperfect and sometimes counterproductive. Critical intelligence might not reach field operators in time to be useful. Technical advice might be based on incomplete information about local conditions. Classification restrictions might prevent sharing of information that could save lives. Network vulnerabilities create risks that extend beyond immediate operational threats. Communication systems can be monitored or disrupted by hostile forces. Database systems might be hacked to obtain intelligence about response capabilities. Personnel might be targeted for recruitment or elimination based on their knowledge of network capabilities. Resource allocation decisions made at network levels affect operational capabilities in ways that field operators might not fully understand. Funding priorities, equipment procurement decisions, and personnel assignments all flow from network-level analysis of threat patterns and resource requirements. These decisions might be made months or years before their operational impact becomes apparent. Quality control across network partners is inconsistent and sometimes inadequate. Not all contributing agencies or countries have the same technical standards, security procedures, or operational capabilities. This creates variability in intelligence quality, equipment reliability, and operational effectiveness that field operators have to account for. Perhaps most importantly, network relationships require constant maintenance and development. Political changes, Budget constraints, personnel turnover, and evolving threat patterns all affect how well these networks function. The relationships that enable effective cooperation have to be built and maintained over time, often by people who never directly participate in operational activities. This global network is both a tremendous resource and a potential vulnerability for bomb disposal operations. It provides capabilities and knowledge that no single agency or country could develop alone. But it also creates dependencies and potential failure points that can affect operational success in ways that are difficult to predict or control. Chapter 16. Beyond the Headlines. Operations You Never Hear About. The bomb disposal operations that make headlines represent only a tiny fraction of the actual work performed by explosive device disposal experts. For every dramatic news story about a terrorist device disarmed in a crowded area, there are dozens of operations that never receive public attention but are equally dangerous and technically challenging. Construction sites regularly uncover unexploded ordnance from previous military activities, industrial accidents, or decades-old disposal practices. These discoveries often occur in populated areas where development has occurred over former military installations or industrial sites. The devices might be unstable from environmental exposure, but they're often in locations where evacuation is difficult, and media attention could create public panic. Industrial accidents involving explosive materials require specialized response that goes beyond normal hazardous materials procedures. Chemical plants, mining operations, transportation accidents, and storage facility incidents can create situations where explosive device disposal techniques are necessary, even though no intentional weapon is involved. These operations often require working in chemically contaminated environments, with time constraints imposed by spreading contamination or structural collapse risks. Law enforcement operations frequently involve suspected explosive devices that turn out to be hoaxes, but each one must be treated as a genuine threat until proven otherwise. False alarm rates are high, but the consequences of treating a real device as a hoax are catastrophic. These operations often occur in residential areas, schools, or workplaces where evacuation and operational procedures must account for civilian safety and cooperation. Military-based security operations deal with suspected devices that might be targeting military personnel or facilities. These operations often involve higher levels of operational security and coordination with military authorities, but they also benefit from military resources and expertise that might not be available for civilian operations. Transportation hubs, airports, train stations, ports, and highway systems present unique operational challenges when explosive devices are suspected. Evacuation procedures must account for large numbers of transient civilians, complex infrastructure, and economic impacts that extend far beyond the immediate area. These operations often require coordination between multiple agencies and jurisdictions. International operations in unstable regions involve not just explosive device disposal, but also force protection, cultural sensitivity, and coordination with local authorities who might have limited resources or conflicting priorities. These operations often occur in environments where standard procedures and equipment might not be appropriate for local conditions. Training accidents and equipment failures can create situations that require emergency response by bomb disposal experts. Even in controlled training environments, explosive materials can malfunction in unexpected ways. These incidents often involve injured personnel, damaged facilities, and time pressure to prevent additional casualties. Cold case investigations sometimes require analysis of explosive devices or their remnants years or decades after the original incident. These investigations might involve devices that were never fully analyzed, or new techniques that can extract additional information from old evidence. The devices might be unstable from age and environmental exposure, But the legal and investigative requirements are different from immediate threat response. Research and development activities require testing and evaluation of new explosive materials, detection techniques, or protective equipment. These activities often involve known explosive materials under controlled conditions, but they still require bomb disposal expertise to ensure safety and extract useful technical information. Private sector operations include corporate security threats, infrastructure protection, and specialized consulting services. These operations might involve proprietary information, non-standard threat patterns, or resource limitations that don't exist in government operations. They also might not have the same backup resources or legal protections available to government operators. The psychological impact of these routine operations is often underestimated. Working regularly with explosive devices, even in controlled circumstances, creates cumulative stress that affects operators regardless of the specific operational context. The mental process of analyzing potential threats and planning disarmament procedures is the same whether the device is real or fake, active or inert. Documentation and analysis requirements for these operations are often more extensive than for emergency response operations. There's more time for detailed documentation, but there are also more opportunities for analysis and learning. These operations often provide the technical knowledge and procedural refinements that enable successful response to more dramatic threats. Public safety considerations for routine operations are often more complex than for emergency operations. There's more time to plan evacuations and coordinate with civilian authorities, but there are also higher expectations for minimizing disruption to normal activities. The balance between safety and convenience is often more difficult to achieve than in clear emergency situations. These routine operations are where most bomb disposal experts spend most of their time. They're not as dramatic as the operations that make headlines, but they're equally important for maintaining public safety and developing the skills and knowledge necessary to handle more serious threats. They're also where operators learn to manage the psychological stress of working with explosive devices without the adrenaline boost that comes with clear emergency situations. Chapter 17. The Retirement Question. When survival becomes unsustainable. Every bomb disposal expert eventually faces a question that most other professions never contemplate. When does the cumulative risk of continued operations exceed your ability to function effectively? This isn't about mandatory retirement ages or pension eligibility. It's about recognizing when your own psychological and physical changes make you a danger to yourself and others. Physical deterioration affects bomb disposal capabilities in ways that aren't always obvious. Fine motor skills decline with age, affecting your ability to manipulate small components with thick gloves. Visual acuity changes might prevent accurate identification of device components or wire colors. Hearing loss from exposure to explosions might affect communication with team members. Back and joint problems from wearing heavy protective equipment might limit your ability to work in awkward positions for extended periods. But physical changes are often less significant than psychological ones. Hypervigilance, that was once an asset, can become paralyzing anxiety. Risk tolerance that enabled effective operations can shift to either reckless overconfidence or paralyzing caution. The mental agility required to analyze novel threats might decline, leading to over-reliance on familiar patterns that might not apply to new situations. Family considerations often drive retirement decisions more than personal safety concerns. Spouses and children who have lived with the stress of loving someone in a high-risk profession might reach their own breaking points. The cumulative effect of years of anxiety, disrupted family life, and constant awareness of mortality can damage relationships even when individual operations are successful. Financial planning for retirement is complicated by the specialized nature of bomb disposal skills. The knowledge and experience that make you valuable in this profession don't always transfer to civilian careers. Some operators transition to training, consulting, or equipment development roles. Others find that their skills are primarily applicable to other high-risk government or military positions. Health insurance and disability coverage become critical considerations as operators age. The long-term health effects of stress, chemical exposure, and physical demands might not become apparent until years after retirement from operational roles. Some medical conditions related to bomb disposal work might not be recognized by standard insurance policies or disability systems. The transition to civilian life often involves psychological challenges that are difficult to predict or prepare for. The intense focus and high-stakes decision-making of bomb disposal work can make civilian employment seem mundane or meaningless. The camaraderie and shared understanding of operational teams is often impossible to replicate in civilian workplaces. Some operators struggle with survivor guilt after retirement, wondering whether their experience and skills might have prevented casualties in operations they weren't available for. Others experience relief, but also a sense of loss of purpose and identity. The profession becomes so central to personal identity that retirement feels like losing yourself rather than changing careers. Post-traumatic stress symptoms often become more apparent after retirement from operational roles. The hypervigilance and emotional numbing that helped manage operational stress might no longer be necessary, allowing suppressed psychological effects to emerge. Some retirees require extensive mental health support to process experiences that they couldn't fully address while still operating. Continuing education and skill maintenance become personal decisions rather than professional requirements after retirement. Some operators maintain their technical knowledge and certifications even after leaving operational roles. Others prefer to distance themselves completely from bomb disposal activities. There's no right answer, but the decision affects what options might be available if circumstances change. Geographic relocation is common after retirement from bomb disposal operations. Some operators prefer to move away from areas where they worked operationally, seeking environments with fewer reminders of their high-risk career. Others prefer to stay near support networks and familiar medical facilities. The decision often depends on family considerations and available employment opportunities. Volunteer activities and community involvement can provide meaningful ways to apply operational experience without accepting ongoing personal risk. Some retirees work with emergency management agencies, training programs, or community safety organizations. Others prefer activities that have no connection to their operational careers. The timing of retirement decisions is often unpredictable. A single traumatic incident might precipitate immediate retirement. Gradual accumulation of stress might lead to planned career transitions. Family crises might force earlier retirement than anticipated. Health problems might make the decision for you. There's no standard timeline or decision-making process that works for everyone. Perhaps most challenging is the fact that retirement from bomb disposal operations is usually permanent. The skills and psychological conditioning required for effective performance deteriorate quickly without regular practice. Physical capabilities that decline with age can't be restored through training. Once you've left operational roles, returning is usually neither practical nor safe. This makes the retirement decision particularly difficult because it's often irreversible. You're not just changing jobs, you're permanently leaving a profession that has defined your identity, skills, and worldview. For many operators, this transition is as psychologically challenging as the operational work itself, but without the support systems and shared understanding that exist within the operational community. Chapter 18. The Next Generation. Training tomorrow's experts. The future of bomb disposal depends not just on technological advances, but on successfully transferring knowledge and skills from experienced operators to new generations who will face threats that don't exist yet. This knowledge transfer is complicated by the rapid evolution of threats, the specialized nature of the skills involved, and the psychological challenges of preparing someone to function in life-threatening situations. Recruitment for bomb disposal training is becoming increasingly difficult as military service rates decline and civilian understanding of the profession remains limited. The skills and psychological characteristics that predict success in bomb disposal work are rare in the general population. Traditional recruitment approaches may not reach suitable candidates, and alternative career paths often offer better compensation with lower personal risk. Modern training programs must balance traditional hands-on instruction with advanced simulation technologies. Virtual reality systems can provide realistic training experiences without the risks and costs associated with live explosive materials. But simulation has limitations. It can't replicate the psychological pressure of working with actual explosive devices or the physical demands of working in protective equipment under stressful conditions. Generational differences in learning styles and risk tolerance affect training program design. Younger trainees might be more comfortable with digital interfaces and complex technologies, but they might have less experience with hands-on mechanical work and problem-solving without technological assistance. These differences require adaptive training approaches that build on existing strengths while developing necessary capabilities. The knowledge base that new operators must master is expanding constantly. Traditional explosive device types remain relevant, but new threats incorporating advanced technologies, novel materials, and sophisticated trigger mechanisms require additional expertise. Training programs must prepare operators for both current threats and future developments that are difficult to predict. International cooperation in training programs is increasing as threats become more globally distributed. Training exchanges, shared curricula, and coordinated research programs help ensure that operators worldwide have access to current knowledge and techniques. But cultural differences, language barriers, and varying resource levels create challenges in implementing standardized international training programs. Psychological screening and preparation for new operators is becoming more sophisticated as understanding of the mental demands of bomb disposal work improves. Assessment tools can help identify candidates who are likely to succeed, but they can't predict how individuals will respond to the actual stress of operational work. Training programs must include not just technical instruction, but psychological conditioning that prepares operators for the mental demands they will face. Mentorship relationships between experienced and new operators are crucial for successful knowledge transfer. But they're becoming more difficult to maintain as operational tempo increases and experienced operators face their own career transition decisions. The informal knowledge that comes from years of operational experience is often difficult to capture in formal training programs, but essential for operational success. Technology integration in training must prepare operators for both current and future equipment, while ensuring that they can function effectively when technology fails. New operators need to understand advanced detection and analysis equipment, but they also need basic skills that remain relevant when sophisticated systems are unavailable or malfunctioning. Ethical training is becoming increasingly important as bomb disposal operations occur in complex political and legal environments. Operators need to understand not just technical procedures, but also legal requirements, cultural sensitivities, and ethical considerations that affect operational decision-making. These considerations might not directly affect device disarmament techniques, but they affect operational effectiveness and professional sustainability. Research integration into training programs helps ensure that new operators understand not just current procedures, but the reasoning behind them and how they might need to adapt as threats evolve. Understanding why certain techniques work enables operators to modify their approaches when faced with novel situations that don't match their training scenarios exactly. Quality assurance in training programs requires constant evaluation and updating as operational experience reveals gaps or shortcomings in current approaches. Training programs that produce technically competent operators who can't function effectively under operational stress are ultimately counterproductive and potentially dangerous. Career development planning for new operators must account for the limited operational lifespan typical in bomb disposal work. Training programs should prepare operators not just for immediate operational roles, but for career transitions that will inevitably occur as they age, accumulate stress, or face family pressures that make continued operational work unsustainable. The challenge of training the next generation extends beyond individual operators to institutional knowledge preservation. As experienced operators retire, they take with them informal knowledge, judgment patterns, and situational awareness that can't easily be captured in written procedures or formal training programs. This knowledge gap creates vulnerabilities that might not become apparent until new operators face novel situations without the benefit of accumulated wisdom. Chapter 19. The Economics of Survival. The Hidden Costs of Safety. The financial infrastructure that supports bomb disposal operations is vast, complex, and largely invisible to the public. Understanding these economics helps explain why some operations succeed while others fail, why certain equipment is available while other tools remain theoretical, and why the profession attracts certain types of organizations and individuals. Personnel costs extend far beyond salaries for active operators. Training programs require significant investment before operators become productive. Continuing education, equipment maintenance training, and psychological support all represent ongoing expenses. The specialized nature of the skills means that replacement costs are high when operators leave the profession. Equipment costs are staggering and constantly increasing. A basic bomb disposal robot can cost several $100,000. Protective suits require regular replacement and maintenance. Detection equipment needs constant calibration and updating. X-ray systems, disruptors, and specialized tools all represent major capital investments that must be justified through budget processes that often don't fully understand operational requirements. Insurance and liability costs reflect the high-risk nature of the profession. Organizations that employ bomb disposal experts face potential liability for injuries, deaths, property damage, and operational failures. Insurance companies often exclude coverage for certain types of incidents, requiring self-insurance or specialized policies that can be extremely expensive. Research and development funding determines what new capabilities will be available to future operators. Government funding priorities, private sector investment decisions, and academic research directions all affect the pace of technological development in detection, protection, and analysis equipment. These funding decisions are often made by people with limited understanding of operational requirements. International cooperation requires sustained funding for training exchanges, equipment sharing, and intelligence cooperation programs. These programs provide significant operational benefits, but the costs are often distributed across multiple agencies and countries in ways that make cost-benefit analysis difficult. Facility costs for training, equipment storage, and operational staging are substantial and ongoing. Training ranges require specialized construction and constant maintenance. Equipment storage facilities need climate control and security systems. Operational staging areas must be strategically located, but also expensive to maintain. The economic impact of bomb disposal operations extends far beyond the direct costs of the operations themselves. Evacuations disrupt commerce, transportation, and public services. False alarms still require full response protocols, creating costs even when no actual threat exists. The economic disruption of a single incident can easily exceed the annual budget for an entire bomb disposal program. Cost-benefit analysis for bomb disposal programs is extremely difficult because the benefits, preventing casualties and damage, are largely theoretical until an actual incident occurs. Justifying program costs requires estimating the probability and potential impact of threats that may never materialize. This creates constant pressure to reduce costs for programs whose value is difficult to quantify. Private sector involvement in bomb disposal activities is increasing as governments seek to control costs and access specialized capabilities. Private contractors provide training, equipment, and even operational services in some contexts. But privatization creates new challenges in quality control, security, and operational coordination. Budget planning for bomb disposal programs must account for highly variable operational tempo and unpredictable equipment needs. Unlike most government programs, bomb disposal requirements can't be predicted accurately from historical patterns because threat evolution is rapid and unpredictable. This makes long-term budget planning extremely difficult. The economics of threat prevention versus response involves complex calculations about resource allocation between proactive security measures and reactive bomb disposal capabilities. Investing in prevention might reduce the need for bomb disposal operations, but it's impossible to measure how many incidents are prevented by various security measures. Personnel retention is significantly affected by compensation levels compared to alternative career opportunities. Bomb disposal experts often have skills that are valuable in private sector security, defense contracting, or law enforcement roles that might offer better compensation with lower personal risk. Retention requires competitive compensation packages that account for the unique demands and risks of the profession. Geographic location affects program costs significantly. Operations in remote areas require different logistics and support structures than urban operations. International operations involve additional costs for transportation, coordination, and cultural adaptation. These geographic factors often aren't adequately considered in budget planning processes. The hidden costs of psychological support, medical care, and disability compensation for bomb disposal personnel often don't appear in operational budgets, but represent significant long-term expenses. The physical and psychological toll of the profession creates costs that continue long after operators retire from active duty. Perhaps most importantly, the economics of bomb disposal programs are ultimately secondary to their necessity. These programs exist not because they're cost-effective, but because the alternatives, allowing explosive devices to function as designed, are unacceptable. This creates a unique budget dynamic where cost considerations must be balanced against absolute requirements for public safety. Chapter 20. Technology Horizons. The Future of Diffusing Death. The future of bomb disposal is being shaped by technological developments that are advancing faster than the profession's ability to adapt and integrate them. Understanding these emerging technologies provides insight into how the profession might evolve, but also reveals new vulnerabilities and challenges that tomorrow's operators will face. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are beginning to transform threat analysis and device identification. AI systems can analyze patterns in device construction, predict likely trigger mechanisms, and suggest disarmament approaches based on historical data. But AI systems are only as good as their training data, and they may not recognize novel threats or adapt appropriately to unexpected variations in device construction. Quantum technologies promise revolutionary advances in detection and analysis capabilities. Quantum sensors could potentially detect explosive materials with unprecedented sensitivity and precision. Quantum computing might enable analysis of complex chemical signatures or electromagnetic patterns that are beyond current computational capabilities. But quantum technologies also create new vulnerabilities as hostile forces develop quantum-resistant encryption and communication systems. Nanotechnology applications in bomb disposal could include microscopic sensors that provide detailed chemical analysis, self-repairing protective equipment, and ultra-lightweight materials that maintain protective capabilities while reducing physical burden on operators. But nanotechnology also enables the construction of explosive devices using materials and techniques that might be undetectable by current methods. Robotics are becoming increasingly sophisticated, with advanced manipulation capabilities, improved mobility, and enhanced sensory systems. Future robots might have tactile feedback, chemical analysis capabilities, and decision-making algorithms that approach human-level performance. But more sophisticated robots also create new failure modes and require more complex training for human operators. Augmented reality systems could overlay digital information onto an operator's visual field, providing real-time analysis, historical data, and expert consultation during operations. AR systems could guide operators through complex procedures, highlight important features of devices, and provide immediate access to technical databases. But AR systems also create information overload risks and potential distractions during critical operations. Brain-computer interfaces represent the ultimate fusion of human judgment with technological capabilities. Direct neural interfaces could potentially provide operators with enhanced sensory input, improved memory access, and direct control of robotic systems. But these technologies are decades away from practical implementation and raise significant safety and ethical questions. Biotechnology applications might include enhanced human performance through genetic modifications or pharmaceutical interventions that improve stress tolerance, reaction times, or cognitive function under pressure. But biological enhancements create new ethical dilemmas and potential health risks that may not be acceptable for operational personnel. Materials science advances are producing new protective materials that offer better protection with less weight and bulk. Smart materials that respond to threats automatically, self-healing materials that repair damage, and adaptive materials that adjust their properties based on environmental conditions all offer potential advantages for protective equipment. Energy technologies including advanced batteries, wireless power transmission, and energy harvesting systems could eliminate power limitations that currently constrain operations. Unlimited power could enable the use of high-energy detection systems, powered exoskeletons, and sophisticated analysis equipment without concern for battery life. Communication technologies are advancing towards secure, high-bandwidth, low-latency systems that could enable real-time consultation with experts worldwide during operations. Quantum communication systems could provide absolutely secure channels for sensitive operational information. But advanced communication systems also create new vulnerabilities to jamming, interception, and spoofing. The integration challenge for these emerging technologies is significant. Each new capability requires training, maintenance, and operational procedures that must be developed and tested before deployment. The interaction between multiple advanced systems can create unexpected behaviors or failure modes that are difficult to predict or manage. But perhaps the most important consideration is that technological advances by defensive forces are matched by similar advances in offensive capabilities. As bomb disposal technology becomes more sophisticated, so do the explosive devices and delivery methods used by hostile forces. The technology race continues to accelerate, with neither side maintaining permanent advantages. The human element remains central to bomb disposal operations regardless of technological advances. Technology can enhance human capabilities, provide better information, and reduce certain risks. But it cannot replace human judgment, creativity, and adaptability in novel situations. The challenge is integrating new technologies in ways that enhance, rather than replace, essential human capabilities. Future bomb disposal operators will need to be both technologically sophisticated and fundamentally grounded in basic principles of explosive device analysis and disarmament. They will work with tools that are more powerful than anything currently available, but they will face threats that are equally advanced and potentially more dangerous than current devices. The future of bomb disposal will be defined not just by technological capabilities, but by the ability to maintain the human skills and judgment that remain essential for survival in environments designed to kill those who enter them. Technology will change, but the fundamental challenge remains the same. Human beings betting their lives on their ability to outsmart devices designed by people who want them dead. Sarentooth. Chapter 21. The Weight of Silence. What they don't tell their families. There are conversations that bomb disposal experts never have with the people who love them. Not because they don't want to, but because some experiences simply cannot be translated into words that civilians can understand. The weight of this silence creates a unique form of isolation that affects every relationship in an operator's life. The moment when you realize you've made a mistake, when you've cut the wrong wire, disturbed the wrong component, or misinterpreted a device's construction, is indescribable. Time doesn't slow down like in movies. Instead, everything accelerates. Your mind processes the implications faster than conscious thought can follow. You realize that the next few seconds will determine whether you continue to exist or become a memory. How do you explain that experience to someone who has never faced their own mortality so directly? The hypervigilance never completely turns off, even during intimate moments. You scan restaurant entrances for suspicious packages. You analyze your neighbor's behavior patterns. You notice when trash cans are placed in unusual locations or when construction equipment appears overnight. This constant state of assessment affects every social interaction, every family gathering, every moment of supposed relaxation. The dreams are particularly difficult to explain because they often aren't nightmares in the traditional sense. Sometimes they're dreams where you successfully disarm devices, but wake up uncertain whether the experience was real or imagined. Sometimes they're dreams where you're working on familiar devices, but can't remember the procedures. The confusion between dream and reality can be more disturbing than clearly frightening nightmares. There's a specific type of guilt that comes from surviving situations where others might have died. Not survivor guilt in the traditional sense, but the awareness that your continued existence depends partially on luck factors beyond your control. Device construction variations, timing coincidences, equipment performance all contribute to operational outcomes in ways that have nothing to do with skill or preparation. Living with that randomness affects how you view your own competence and mortality. The physical toll accumulates in ways that aren't visible to outside observers. Chronic pain from carrying heavy equipment, hearing damage from exposure to explosions, chemical sensitivity from hazardous materials exposure, and sleep disorders from irregular schedules all contribute to health problems that develop gradually over years of operational service. Family members see the effects, but rarely understand the causes. Social interactions become strained not just because of security requirements, but because normal social concerns seem trivial compared to daily life and death decisions. When someone complains about workplace stress, traffic problems, or relationship issues, it requires conscious effort to respond appropriately, rather than with the perspective that these problems are inconsequential compared to explosive device disposal. The technical knowledge you carry represents both capability and burden. Understanding how explosive devices work, how they can be constructed from common materials, and how they can be deployed effectively creates a unique form of awareness that affects how you view public spaces, crowded events, and infrastructure vulnerabilities. This knowledge can't be shared casually and can't be forgotten. Operational security requirements create necessary but artificial boundaries in personal relationships. You can't discuss specific operations, techniques, or intelligence information even with immediate family members. This creates situations where your closest relationships involve people who understand very little about how you spend most of your professional life. The transition between operational and personal mindsets requires conscious effort that most people never have to develop. You need to shift from hypervigilant threat assessment mode to relaxed family interaction mode, often within minutes of leaving operational sites. This psychological shifting becomes exhausting over time and sometimes doesn't work effectively. There's a unique form of loneliness that comes from being one of relatively few people who understand the specific pressures and requirements of bomb disposal work. Even within the professional community, experiences vary significantly based on assignment location, operational tempo, and individual psychological responses. Finding someone who truly understands your specific situation is often impossible. The awareness of mortality that comes from regularly facing death creates different perspectives on long-term planning, relationship investments, and life priorities. It's difficult to explain to family members why certain planning discussions feel pointless, or why you have trouble committing to long-term goals when your professional reality involves regular reminders of life's fragility. Perhaps most challenging is explaining why you continue in a profession that causes obvious stress and carries significant personal risk. The combination of professional satisfaction, skill utilization, and service motivation that keeps operators in the field is difficult to communicate to people who haven't experienced similar challenges. Family members often perceive continued operational service as a choice to prioritize professional fulfillment over family stability and personal safety. This silence isn't maintained out of indifference or emotional distance. It's maintained out of love. The recognition that sharing certain experiences would transfer psychological burdens to people who are already carrying the stress of loving someone in a high-risk profession. The silence becomes another form of protection, but it's protection that creates its own form of isolation and relationship strain. Chapter 22. When the Unthinkable Happens, Learning from Loss. Despite all the training, equipment, technology, and expertise, bomb disposal operations sometimes end in the deaths of the people performing them. These incidents are rare, carefully investigated, and deeply traumatic for the professional community. But they also provide crucial lessons that might prevent future casualties. Lessons written in blood and paid for with lives. The investigation of fatal incidents follows protocols that are both thorough and necessarily clinical. Every decision, every procedure, every equipment function must be analyzed to determine what went wrong and why. This analysis often takes months and involves multiple agencies, technical experts, and independent reviewers. The goal isn't to assign blame, but to understand failure mechanisms that might be prevented in future operations. Equipment failures that contribute to fatalities range from obvious mechanical malfunctions to subtle design flaws that only become apparent under operational stress. Protective suits that fail to protect, communication systems that malfunction at critical moments, and analysis equipment that provides misleading information have all contributed to fatal incidents. These failures drive improvements in equipment design and testing protocols. Human factors analysis examines the decision-making processes, stress responses, and training adequacy that might have contributed to fatal outcomes. This analysis is particularly sensitive because it requires examining the actions of deceased operators without the benefit of their perspectives on why they made specific choices. The goal is understanding, not judgment, but the process is inevitably painful for colleagues and family members. Environmental factors that contribute to fatalities include weather conditions, physical obstacles, time constraints, and coordination problems with other agencies. These factors often interact in ways that create cascading failures, where multiple small problems combine to create catastrophic outcomes. Understanding these interaction patterns helps improve operational planning and risk assessment. The psychological impact of fatal incidents extends far beyond the immediate operational team. Other bomb disposal experts often experience survivor guilt, questioning whether they could have prevented the loss through different advice, better training, or alternative approaches. This secondary trauma can affect operational performance and career sustainability for operators who weren't directly involved in fatal incident. Training modifications based on fatal incident analysis often involve subtle changes in procedures, emphasis, or decision-making frameworks, rather than dramatic overhauls of existing approaches. Small changes in how operators are taught to assess specific types of threats, communicate with team members, or respond to equipment malfunctions can prevent similar fatalities in future operations. Institutional responses to fatal incidents vary depending on organizational culture, political pressures, and resource availability. Some organizations implement comprehensive changes to reduce future risks. Others focus on individual factors to avoid addressing systemic problems. The effectiveness of institutional responses often determines whether fatal incidents result in meaningful improvements to operational safety. Memorial practices within the bomb disposal community serve both to honor fallen colleagues and to reinforce safety awareness among surviving operators. These practices include formal ceremonies, professional recognition programs, and informal traditions that keep the memory of lost colleagues present in daily operations. The goal is remembrance without morbid preoccupation. Family support following fatal incidents is often inadequate despite the best intentions of organizations and colleagues. The unique circumstances of bomb disposal deaths, often involving classified operations, extensive investigations, and media attention, create challenges that standard support systems aren't designed to address. Families need specialized support that understands the specific circumstances they're facing. Legal proceedings following fatal incidents can be complex and prolonged, involving workers' compensation claims, wrongful death lawsuits, and regulatory investigations. These proceedings often require detailed analysis of operational procedures, training adequacy, and equipment performance. The legal process can be additional trauma for families already dealing with sudden loss. Media coverage of fatal bomb disposal incidents often focuses on heroic narratives that, while well-intentioned, sometimes misrepresent the technical and procedural factors that contributed to the deaths. Accurate reporting requires understanding complex technical information and operational contexts that are difficult to communicate in general interest media formats. The ripple effects of fatal incidents extend throughout the professional community and into recruiting, training, and retention for bomb disposal programs. Public awareness of fatalities can reduce interest in bomb disposal careers and increase concern among family members of current operators. These effects can compound staffing challenges that already exist in the profession. Perhaps most importantly, fatal incidents serve as reminders that bomb disposal operations involve irreducible risks that can't be eliminated through any combination of training, equipment, or procedures. This reality must be balanced against the necessity of continuing operations to protect public safety. The professional community must learn from losses while continuing to function in environments where such losses are always possible. Learning from fatal incidents is both a technical necessity and a moral obligation to fallen colleagues and their families. The lessons derived from these tragic events become part of the institutional knowledge that protects future operators. In this way, the deaths of bomb disposal experts contribute to the survival of those who continue their work, creating a form of legacy that honors sacrifice through enhanced safety for others. Chapter 23: The Final Wire: Why Most Wouldn't Survive. After exploring the reality of bomb disposal work, from the crushing weight of protective equipment to the psychological aftermath of successful operations, one truth becomes inescapable. This profession exists at the absolute edge of human capability, where survival depends on the intersection of technical knowledge, physical endurance, psychological resilience, and pure luck. The mathematics of survival in bomb disposal work are unforgiving. Every operation involves probability calculations where the consequences of error are binary. You live or you die. There are no partial credit scores, no second chances, no opportunities to learn from mistakes. The margin for error is essentially zero, maintained only through extensive training, sophisticated equipment, and operational procedures developed through decades of experience and analysis of failures. Physical demands that would challenge elite athletes are just the baseline requirements for operating effectively. Carrying 100 pounds of protective equipment while performing microsurgery-level precision work on devices designed to kill you requires a combination of strength, endurance, and fine motor control that few people possess naturally, and fewer still can maintain under extreme stress. The psychological profile required for effective bomb disposal work is statistically rare in the general population. You need sufficient risk tolerance to approach explosive devices voluntarily, but not so much that you become reckless. You need enough fear to maintain appropriate caution, but not so much that it interferes with decision-making. You need the ability to function in isolation while making life or death decisions, but also the interpersonal skills necessary for effective team coordination. Technical knowledge requirements continue to expand as threats evolve and become more sophisticated. Modern bomb disposal experts must understand chemistry, electronics, materials science, physics, and engineering principles at levels that approach or exceed professional specialization in each field. This knowledge must be immediately accessible under extreme stress and constantly updated as new threats emerge. The time pressures involved in many operations eliminate the luxury of methodical analysis that characterizes other high-stakes professions. Surgeons, pilots, and nuclear power plant operators all work in life or death situations, but they typically have standard procedures, consultation resources, and decision-making frameworks that provide structure for their responses. Bomb disposal operators often work alone, without established procedures for novel situations, making critical decisions with incomplete information. Equipment dependency creates vulnerabilities that can't be eliminated through redundancy or backup systems. When your life depends on the proper function of complex technological systems operating in hostile environments, single points of failure become existential threats. The most advanced detection equipment becomes useless if it malfunctions at a critical moment, leaving operators dependent on visual analysis and mechanical intuition. Environmental factors compound all other challenges in ways that are difficult to predict or control. Weather conditions, lighting, background noise, time constraints, and physical obstacles all affect operational performance, while the fundamental requirement, disarming explosive devices safely, remains unchanged. Operators must maintain peak performance regardless of external conditions. The isolation inherent in bomb disposal operations means that when things go wrong, help is often too far away to matter. While team members provide support and consultation, the operator working directly with the device is ultimately alone with their decisions and their consequences. This isolation extends beyond physical distance to the psychological reality that no one else can fully understand the specific pressures and requirements of each operational moment. Career sustainability in bomb disposal work is limited not just by age and physical capacity, but by the cumulative psychological impact of repeatedly facing mortality. The mental health challenges, relationship strain, and stress-related physical problems that characterize this profession create natural endpoints that have nothing to do with technical competence or professional dedication. The support systems necessary for bomb disposal operators, training programs, equipment development, intelligence networks, and psychological services represent massive investments that are difficult to justify through traditional cost-benefit analysis. These programs exist because the consequences of not having them are unacceptable, but their resource requirements limit how many people can be supported in bomb disposal roles. Perhaps most fundamentally, bomb disposal work requires sustained performance in situations that violate basic human survival instincts. Every approach to a potential explosive device requires overriding millions of years of evolutionary programming that says to run away from threats, not walk carefully toward them while carrying detailed analysis equipment. This psychological override becomes increasingly difficult to maintain over extended careers. The combination of all these factors, physical demands, psychological requirements, technical complexity, environmental challenges, equipment dependencies, time pressures, and isolation, creates a profession that operates at the absolute limits of human capability. Success requires not just meeting each individual requirement, but maintaining peak performance across all dimensions simultaneously while knowing that failure in any area means immediate death. Most people wouldn't survive their first day as a bomb disposal expert not because they lack courage, intelligence, or dedication, but because the profession requires a combination of capabilities that exists in very few individuals and can be sustained by even fewer over the time periods necessary for professional competence. The people who do succeed in this profession aren't superhuman. They're individuals who happen to possess the specific combination of physical, psychological, and intellectual characteristics necessary for survival in environments designed to kill them. The reality that most wouldn't survive isn't a criticism of human capabilities. It's a recognition of the extraordinary nature of the people who choose to walk toward explosive devices while everyone else runs away. Their willingness to operate at the edge of human survival capability, often in anonymous service to public safety, represents a form of heroism that's difficult to fully appreciate without understanding the true demands of their profession. Conclusion: the silent guardians. As our journey through the world of bomb disposal comes to an end, we're left with a profound appreciation for the people who make career choices that most of us can't even imagine. These are individuals who wake up each morning knowing they might not return home, who walk toward danger while every instinct screams at them to run, and who carry the psychological weight of protecting society from threats that most people never even know existed. The bomb disposal expert checking their equipment in a quiet moment before an operation, the team member monitoring radio communications from a safe distance, the family member waiting for news that the operation concluded successfully, all are part of a world that exists parallel to our daily lives, largely invisible but absolutely essential. These silent guardians operate in the spaces between normal life and catastrophic violence. They stand watch at the boundary between the civilized world and the forces that would destroy it. Their success is measured not in headlines or public recognition, but in the explosions that don't happen, the casualties that are prevented, and the normal life that continues undisturbed because someone was willing to risk everything to ensure it could. The next time you go about your daily routine, walking through a busy airport, attending a crowded event, or simply living without fear of explosive devices, remember that your safety depends partially on people whose names you'll never know, whose faces you'll never see, and whose sacrifices you'll never fully understand. They chose a profession where survival is never guaranteed, where mistakes are measured in lives rather than dollars, and where the ultimate measure of success is that nothing happens. In a world full of people seeking attention, recognition, and public acclaim, bomb disposal experts work in the shadows. They train for situations they hope never to encounter. They develop skills they hope never to use. They prepare for threats that most people prefer not to think about. And when those threats do materialize, they respond not with fanfare, but with quiet competence, methodical analysis, and the kind of courage that doesn't announce itself. So yes, You probably wouldn't last one day as a bomb disposal expert. Neither would most of us. But somewhere, right now, someone is suiting up in 100 pounds of protective equipment, checking their radio communications, and walking toward a device that might explode because they've chosen to stand between danger and the rest of us. They are the silent guardians. And we are safer because they exist. Thank you for joining me on this exploration of one of the world's most demanding professions. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the realities of bomb disposal work, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. And let me know in the comments, what other professions would you like to explore? What other jobs do you think most of us couldn't survive even one day in? Until next time, sleep well, knowing that someone is standing watch.